as leaders, we also have to have an eye on the future and be aware of what's coming down the pipe, looking at repair instructions and the safety portion of those instructions to make sure, are we even properly equipped to have all this stuff on hand for the guys to be safe to even do the work. So yeah, it's going to keep changing, and if you don't keep up with it, you will fall behind very quickly.
Welcome to another episode of the Collision Vision, driven by Auto Body News. As always, I'm your host, Cole Strandberg. Today, we're continuing our series titled Safety First, Prioritizing Health in the Workshop. This has a focus on one of the most important aspects of workplace health, creating a culture of safety in the body shop. Our guest today is Andrew Batenhorst, body shop manager at Pacific BMW. In addition to being all over the industry and very active in his volunteer work, Andrew is a leader with a vision for how to embed safety into the day-to-day practices of body shops. Today, we'll discuss his strategies for building a strong culture of safety, reducing risks on the shop floor, and how prioritizing safety can ultimately improve your business. Enjoy the show. This episode is brought to you by Thryv. Ready to hit the gas on growth? Meet Thryv, the do-it-all small business software that can save you over 20 hours a week. Attract customers, manage day-to-day tasks, and keep communication simple with one powerful tool made for your auto business. Rev up your revenue today and let Thryv save you time so you can get back to doing what you love. Visit thryv.com. That's thryv.com to schedule a demo today. Andrew, thank you for joining us here on the Collision Vision.
Thank you, Cole, for having me. I appreciate it.
Looking forward to a great conversation. In our pre-show call, I mentioned I've seen you before. It feels like you're everywhere. I think yours is a name that a lot of folks know, but would ask you if you could introduce yourself in your own words.
Sure. Again, my name's Andrew Batenhorst. I am currently the body shop manager at Pacific BMW's Collision Center. We're about 10 miles north of downtown LA. I've been working in this industry for about 25 years. I also do a lot of volunteer work. I'm currently the Glendale Foothill chapter president for the California Auto Body Association, and I'm also on the executive committee for the Society of Collision Repair Specialists. And I think I'm also currently participating in 3 different CIC committees. So I'm in all avenues, I think, of where anybody could be in the industry. I've kind of got a little toe in each of those little segments. So it's a lot of fun.
Geez, man, I was telling you, I've seen you before. Certainly your Ideas Collide presentation at SCRS. As I'm doing research, by the time this airs, this will have happened, but I'll be doing that out at SEMA this year. So really appreciate you and the content you put out, and looking forward to a great conversation. I do want to dive right in. Obviously, this is a conversation primarily about safety in the shop. So with your experience running a large BMW collision center operation, from your perspective, what role does safety play in day-to-day operations?
It is paramount. Dealership body shops get a lot of scrutiny, much more so, I would say, than an average independent shop. So we definitely have to step our game up. I came from an independent shop before I started working here, and we had a third-party safety company that would come in, I think, monthly or quarterly to do audits. But here, this is an even higher level of scrutiny we put on safety. So I had to elevate my game when I got here to make sure that I was doing everything that needed to be done. So it can be challenging, I think, in the beginning as you ramp up and start learning about the differences in terms of what you need to be doing. The type of work you're doing is obviously going to dictate some of the safety requirements. I know not every shop does EV work, and we do a lot of that. So that definitely can adjust that onboarding time as you start to get everything dialed in.
Man, I want to dive into the EV conversation a little bit later in our chat, but I want to talk too about this safety first mindset. Could certainly be a bit of a culture shock, I would imagine, if you come from somewhere that's not always front of mind. How have you seen a safety first mindset kind of impact beyond safety, but culture?
I think it shows, obviously, I think that's like a bare minimum requirement that you have all these safety procedures and SOPs and things in place. But I think the team, when they saw how serious I take it and I'm providing the necessary PPE, I'm making sure they're doing safety training, we're regularly auditing ourselves to make sure safety is being handled correctly. They see that I'm vested in it to the max that I possibly can be. I think that gives them a level of comfort, a level of peace to a degree, because they know this is dangerous work. They see what they're touching and what they need to be prepared for. But I think the risk of not having that mindset is far, far greater than the effort you need to expend to build the infrastructure, get the logistical side of it, and then establish the culture. So after you get through that portion of it, though, and it's regularly maintained, I find that it's not that difficult once you get through that.
The upfront effort seems like it might be a little daunting. And so I want to frame this as, say we have a listener today who owns an independent body shop, and he's sitting here thinking, safety sounds like a good thing. I don't think my guys are doing it right. What steps do you recommend that individual take to begin from scratch, essentially building that culture of safety?
You got to make a decision. I think it could go one of two ways. First, it would be, do you have the budget internally? And I'm not talking about financial, like the mental budget to be able to start setting this up. And I always joke with my staff on any project you do, we don't want the snake swallowing the pig syndrome where you just bite it all off in one chunk. It's all about tiny bite-sized segments of what, spread the project out into a wide range of steps to achieve the end goal of having that safety culture. So I think for you as a manager or an operator, you got to decide, do I have the bandwidth to even do this? If you don't, that's okay. There's no judgment there. But then you need to align yourself with some type of a third-party company to help you with that. Here at our dealership, we use KPA. I've been really, really happy with them. They give a lot of flexibility in customizing the safety protocols that we need and helping us answer questions on stuff we aren't familiar with. And then they also assist with auditing. So I think it all starts at you individually about what you have the capacity to do. And then that's going to guide you in terms of the different routes that you can go.
From kind of back to that culture piece from day one, walk me through the balance of training, incentivizing, and then enforcing. What happens if we can't get buy-in from the team on something that's something that is mandatory to run a safe operation?
That's happened many times where, it's easy to get into the mode of like just punishment and disciplinary action but there has to be an intrinsic buy-in from the employee. And that may take unorthodox ways of showing them what they're doing wrong and the potential consequence of that. I've had I think every body shop manager can relate to this, but I've had technicians that get metal debris in their eye all the time. And I issue them safety glasses and I give them goggles or whatever, face shields, you name it, that's all available to them. However, sometimes they don't get it. And they have to go through some other process with me personally to do that. And then to make sure that's reinforced, you touched on positive encouragement. Maybe that's a gift card to Starbucks. Maybe that's you buy them lunch or some type of safety award at the end of the month or the end of the quarter. You can get creative with that. You can even make games like safety bingo. You can do all kinds of fun stuff where maybe it's an alternative approach to show the theory of what you're trying to teach and the why. And then they start to build their own buy-in around that to know that, hey, there is risk of severe injury or even death if I don't comply with this. But you as a leader have to have the wherewithal to realize not everybody's going to fit that mold. And if you are struggling to get someone to buy in, trying to do a one-size-fits-all type approach may not work for that rogue person who doesn't want to get into the program.
I think a lot of the detractors, some of the technicians with maybe a more old school mindset might say, what's the point? This is slowing me down. It's hindering productivity. Any examples you can share of how some safety components in the shop can actually increase productivity and kind of flip the script on that argument?
I think that starts the number one way I've seen that is with tooling and then making sure the tooling is operating in the safe manner that it's supposed to be operating in. No tool maintenance or partially broken tools or things not working the way that they're designed end up opening the risk up much quicker for a problem to happen. So the bare minimum stuff like safety glasses, ear protection, gloves, welding jackets, things like that. I've not had a lot of pushback from people wearing those items in my experience. But what I have seen is when technicians have a tendency, because they fix things all the time, they'll just make a band-aid fix on a piece of equipment that they think is okay to get them through the job. And that's where things can go dramatically wrong. And you as a leader have to have some type of mechanism in place to ensure proper maintenance of tooling. So that way people don't do funny Mickey Mouse things to the equipment that gets them through the job, but maybe doesn't resolve the problem for the next person who's going to use that tool. So I've had a lot of experience with that.
I'm sure. I look back and I think of different stories about shop safety of the past. Like Andrew, when did you start in a body shop in your
Uh,
career?
that was 2008, 2009, right out getting out of
Okay.
college. Yeah.
Beautiful. So I hear stories from well before then, though I'm sure you have plenty of stories as well of just some things we look at today as crazy, crazy things being done in the shop. The painter smoking a cigarette while he's painting.
Oh yeah.
Now, that I don't think was commonplace in 2008, but some
Right.
things of that nature. Do you think we're going to be talking about stuff that's happening in shops today, present company excluded, 10 years down the road? Like, man, I can't believe we were doing that. How much innovation do you see ahead for shop safety?
It's going to continue to evolve as quickly as the OEMs evolve with the vehicle construction. I remember when carbon fiber came out on the BMW i3, for example, and I remember going to training and seeing like we had to put on the whole spacesuit where it was the hooded white coverall, tape up the wrists and your feet, and then or you have the booties on, and it's like this is some next level stuff. And the technicians thought this is ridiculous, this is crazy. And I had one technician that actually refused to wear it, and he ended up, there's the carbon fiber dust is very, you can get an allergic reaction on your skin from that, similar to fiberglass insulation. And it took one experience of him dealing with that, and he never did that again. And he made sure he wore his PPE. But that kind of stuff as the adhesives that are needed to bond the new materials coming out, the different types of joining methods to attach these parts together. You're going to have different equipment that maybe operates at higher pressures, uses specialized, larger or smaller types of equipment that may have other risks that we're not even familiar with yet. So I think as leaders, we also have to have an eye on the future and be aware of what's coming down the pipe, looking at repair instructions and the safety portion of those instructions to make sure, are we even properly equipped to have all this stuff on hand for the guys to be safe to even do the work. So yeah, it's going to keep changing. And if you don't keep up with it, you will fall behind very quickly.
Well put. And some of these new innovations that you're talking about, a lot of them are already here. You mentioned the EV piece. I want to talk about today again. I think we just went down a rabbit hole into history and in the future. I want to bring us back to present day.
Yeah.
What are some of the most common safety risks that technicians face? And from your perspective, how can these risks be mitigated?
I think a lot of it start like when you're looking at body and paint technicians, proper respiratory gear, making sure your filters are changed on time and that the face mask or the fresh air hood or whatever you're using is properly maintained. I see a lot of issues with that. Welding PPE, I still hear about guys that are closing their eyes when they weld while the so they don't get the arc flash. And it's like there's stuff like that that I know is prevalent in the industry where it's the old saying, you don't know what you don't know. And I think that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that I know we are working on at SCRS and that we try to preach as in California Auto Body Association meetings to make sure that yeah, these are things you need to do. Not wearing gloves, and the old joke of getting your welder's suntan from welding. It's stuff like that that is frightening to hear that in 2024 that still happens. So I think the education piece continually needs to be reinforced from outlets like what we're doing today, whether it's CIC or SCRS at SEMA, anything like that. The message still needs to be reiterated, because as shocking as that sounds, I think there's a good part of the country that has just kept old habits from that are passed from like older technicians that are passed on to younger guys, like, you don't need any of that, you're going to be fine kind of mentality. And that is not the case.
Oh, nope, absolutely. And coming from the equipment industry, I know about that mentality. I've always done it this way. This is the way I'm going to keep doing it. With safety, we can't have that level of satisfaction with what you've always done.
Yeah.
Whenever we talk about the collision repair industry, generally a term that can come up is liability, whatever the circumstance is, whether it's the liability of putting cars back on the road and ensuring the drivers and the owners of those vehicles are safe, or the liability of something happening within a shop, making sure with all these new technologies, everything that's happening, you are giving your employees and your technicians everything they need to be safe. And you touched on the equipment piece. I want to dive a little bit deeper. How do different equipment maintenance programs and housekeeping practices contribute to a safer working environment, and how can you ensure that that's being done?
There's a couple different schools of thought to that. I mean, we a properly operating piece of equipment is going to do what it's intended to do. The guys don't like to be interrupted, obviously, when a piece of equipment fails. So there's the productivity aspect of having correctly serviced equipment in use regularly, and then there's also the problem that I see more often than not is the lack of the maintenance being done, and the erosion of morale that can take place from not doing that. And that's a very real thing. My dad always taught me when I was a kid, if you're going to do a job, use the right tool to do the job, and make sure that that tool works before you get started on that whatever it is that you're going to do. And I've always tried to keep that mentality as I became a manager, and I knew that that was going to be my responsibility. But I think that there are managers that look at that as a nuisance and an additional cost that they have to be in charge of. It's no different than maintaining your car. If you don't change the oil in your car, your engine's going to grind up with sludge, and it's going to possibly need to be rebuilt. And that cost of rebuilding that engine is now probably astronomically higher compared to if you had just done the oil changes at the regular intervals. So I think the mindset is it's expensive, it's time consuming to do equipment maintenance. But when you look at the owner's manuals for even something like your seam sealer gun, I mean, that's funny we're talking about. I have one on my desk right now. I was looking at maintaining something. The regular maintenance to take care of something is very small, and it's a very small window of time you need to spend to take care of it. But again, if that gets ignored and years go by and it's not taken care of, now the cost is very, very high. So there are a lot of tools out there. Again, you can pay people to maintain your equipment for you, but there are other simple tools that you can use to be on top of that and come up with schedules and maintenance logs and things like that. So it's not the end of the world, and you're carving out maybe 15 minutes to address some maintenance rather than now production's interrupted, the tool is broken, you're looking at buying a new tool instead of repairing what you had, and now you got technicians that aren't producing any hours for you, and you're in a real tough spot.
It's an investment with a very clear ROI, both from a business standpoint, business and morale and beyond. So it makes total sense. I try not to get on a pedestal here and sell things, but man, I feel really good about selling safety and investing in safety for your employees. That I'm okay to just rally the troops for. I'd love that you have an example right here on your desk, checking in on different, that's incredible. What do you look for too? If you're going back and walking the shop with a safety mindset, and you haven't had this kind of approach to it in a little while, what pieces of equipment are you looking at? What are you looking for? What are some red flags that people might know?
I would say start with the most highly used pieces of equipment in the shop. So you're probably talking about your dent pulling equipment, your welders, plastic repair tools, maybe seam sealer and caulking guns on the body side. On the paint side, you're looking at spray guns, you're looking at fresh air systems, the spray booths themselves, the prep stations, things like that. So I would say, when I'm doing reviews of my equipment, I have it broken down into three different segments. I have weekly checks that I do, I have monthly checks, and I have semi-annual checks. And I can there's two ways I like to do it, either with my Outlook calendar, I could schedule stuff out, or I have there's a barcode system called BR Code, which is powered by BitRip software. I've talked about this before at other SCRS events. You can make checklists and generate it's similar to a QR code and a barcode combined, but there's digital tools that you can add to that to make it so you put that sticker on the tool, and now you have a record of all the history of maintenance on that tool that you input. You can add photos to it or instructions, video, owner's manuals, things like that. I've even added QR codes in the shop where you can generate the QR code could generate an SMS, a text message to whoever you want, to me or to a production manager, anybody, and that will it could be pre-populated to say, hey, Andrew, there's a problem with the welder. Come look at it when you have a moment. So the technician doesn't have to leave their stall. They can send me a message very quickly, and then when I get a moment, I can walk out there and investigate, hey, what's the problem with this? And let's come up with a plan. Is it something we can fix ourselves, or is it something I need to send out? However that may work. That's free. So you don't have to spend any money to set that system up in your shop today. And that's what I love about it is I'm looking for the most simplistic, efficient way to do this task, because it's not the most glamorous. It's not the most fun thing to do during the day. But when the guys see me out in the shop doing this stuff, they are also more prone to be careful with the tools and to take care of them, because they know I'm the one fixing it. It's usually if something goes wrong, up to a degree of certain things, right? Sure. So they're like, when they see the tool broken down in my office, take it apart, now they know that, well, we should probably be a little more careful with this. We don't want to make his life a little bit harder. But again, not every manager is going to do what I do and take tools apart, but there's some structure you can add to it to help you make the decision on who's going to help, fix that or send it out or whatever that is for you.
So. Love it. Let's talk EV a little bit. We've had a couple different guests from some EV OEs, Kelly Logan, Jake Rodenroth, both friends of mine. It's always shocking at some of the risks associated with repairing EVs. Walk me through some of those risks. Talk me how you address that, how you ensure training is continued with a real focus on safety.
Yeah, there's tremendous risk. I mean, you're talking with the voltage that's running through these systems is enough to kill you very, very quickly. There's a lot of infrastructure we've had to add into the facility to make sure we're safe. So you're talking like safety barriers around the car. We have the locks, special locks that have only one unique key to that lock. We have signage demonstrating that this vehicle's been safely locked out. Here's the phone number for the technician if you need to call him and he's not at the car. We have a buddy system in place where if someone is deactivating a high voltage system, there's a buddy standing by with the safety hook in the event that there was a problem. I've even gone to the extent of we have a log for the lineman's gloves to ensure that the gloves, when they're signed out, they're tested in front of me. I have the little air pump to inflate the glove, ensure that it has no pinholes in it. And we even have the protective gloves for the protective lineman's gloves to ensure that the gloves don't get damaged. We put in dates on this equipment so we know, because like the lineman gloves have a 6-month lifespan to them. So we want to make sure that there's, the guys know that, hey, this needs to be destroyed after this particular date. So there's a lot of precautions that go into that. And I've even added, signage in the shop. We have the EV safety blankets, the fire suppression blankets, halon fire extinguishers. So there's a significant investment of time, training, and reinforcement that has to go into that, creating that culture. And I think once they see the seriousness that I'm putting behind it and I'm leading by example, that sets the tone for the rest of the team. Because if I slack off on this, they're going to think that, well, it's not that important to Andrew. It's probably not that big a deal for me.
Man, yeah. See, that always just rattles me a little bit when talking about EVs. It's we're talking life and death matters here, and well worth the investment, of course. If I were to ask you to share a scenario where addressing a safety issue prevented a major incident, is there one or two issues that might come to mind?
I have not had any serious incidents aside from minor things like small, you're getting a small cut on your hand or, maybe debris in your eye. That's probably the worst I've ever seen in my experience, or maybe a finger injury, something like that. But beyond that, I think just, especially with the EV stuff, I let them know when we started to take on that work, like, hey, there's a lot that we're going to need to invest in terms of both your requirements as a technician and my requirements as an employer to make sure we both are addressing the concerns safely up front. And thankfully, I've not had any severe problems take place here. You can even, if you're going away from the EV stuff for a moment, even like annual training on using a two-post lift. People may fall into bad habits of not using a lift correctly, and maybe they use a block of wood instead of using a pad like what the tool or like the lift is supposed to have. Like having an eye for that stuff and knowing what's wrong and knowing what's right, that starts to again set a culture, set a standard, set a limit to what I will accept and what they will accept from me. Yeah, that by having that, I think I've been very fortunate to avoid having any severe catastrophes like what you're suggesting could possibly
Great,
happen in the shop.
great to hear. Yeah, a testament. Now, you have a reputation for safety. You must. It's why we reached out to you when we wanted one shop manager to talk to us about safety. There are a ton of great managers out there who are great at safety too, but apparently you're the guy, which is awesome. Do you think that you and your organization having a reputation for safety impacts the ability to attract and retain top talent?
Oh, big time. I've been fortunate, and I'm not trying to brag, but I know most of the industry is struggling with retaining talent and attracting talent to their shop. When people come through for interviews with me and they tour the facility, and a lot of them are shocked to hear, like, yeah, I'll give you a welding jacket if you're going to be welding. If you need, if you're going to weld for me, I'm going to give you a welding helmet. If you're, and whether that, and that's all aspects of every role in the shop that may have a safety risk with the position that they're doing or the task that they're doing. So to me, that is a minimum, and that's just something that how I hold myself and how I hold this company for what we need to do. But I do find that it disturbs me to a degree that separates me from other operations and other shops. That makes me attractive because I have these things, but that only motivates me more to help the industry and show that these are all minimum things that although there may not be looked at as a direct benefit per se of working for me or working in this shop, that is something that I think that if you want to separate yourself from the rest of the industry that's struggling to do those things, yeah, it can. But I don't want it to be used as a bragging point. I don't want it to be used as something like that, And that's where, doing talks like this today, I hope I can maybe lend a perspective to other managers that this is something that should just be a standard, not something as like that's a perk or a luxury of working here.
Sure. Well, I don't think we need any sweeteners to this. I think everyone from a human level understands the positive. I think from a cultural perspective, people are going to get that as well. Talk to me about safety from a perspective of profitability. We know if you can retain and attract good talent, you're likely to have better luck with increased profitability as well. But how do you relate those two?
Look at just from an efficiency standpoint of having your people all in the shop each day working. If you have people that are routinely getting injured or routinely not able to produce the work they need to produce because of faulty equipment or unsafe equipment or missing equipment or whatever that may be, yeah, your productivity is going to suffer. You're going to have inconsistent output each day. You're going to have work that gets batched through the shop in bunches rather than having a nice, constant, even flow. And I think once you start to make these kinds of cultural shifts in your operation with safety, you'll start to see that the interruptions each day start to diminish and go away. And then morale and everything starts to become a lot better. We're all about work-life balance here, and I don't want to add any more stress to the work that we're doing. The work itself is hard as it is, and carrying the safety risk with doing the work. If I have an operation that is lacking on those safety items, and I'm now asking people to produce that same level of work at a high standard with like a saddle on their back of these problems, I would feel guilty. I would feel terrible at the end of the day, because that's not a place I would want to work.
Sure. Nope. Well put. I want to kind of bring all of this to a good stopping point, and this is going to be somewhat repetitive, but I want to drive it home. Again, putting that shop owner's hat who says, hey, I might not be investing in safety as much as I should be. What advice would you give to that shop owner who might be hesitant to invest in safety measures, and how can they start small and make a big impact?
I think there's two things here. You can either instill fear, right, into a manager to do these things because there's liability. You can get sued. You can get OSHA coming into your shop and looking at things going wrong. So there's the fear motivator of like, yeah, you better get your stuff together so that way you don't have this going on, right? We touched on the efficiency side, where that lends to the motivator of positivity, being in a safe environment, a clean environment with well-maintained equipment. That's great for the team and the staff. But I think if you're choosing a way to get started, I would start to look at the low-hanging fruit of the common things that I mentioned earlier about welding, refinishing, using certain chemicals, respiratory protection. Maybe choose 4 or 5 items, do an audit in your shop to see what the needs are, find out where there's some deficiencies, and start then making some investments either financially in your budget you do each year. Set aside money for that, have a safety budget if you're struggling with that in terms of the financial side, and then setting up regular, whether that's quarterly, maybe small mini trainings for the staff. When it's in the summer, you do like heat illness prevention, or maybe it's about a safety theme that's been a prevalent problem in your shop. Choose a couple subjects to touch on, go over best practices, and then just walking the floor, looking at the equipment that they're using, making sure it's safe and that it doesn't need repair, and even looking at the technicians and making sure that stuff they have on is not worn out or broken or even just missing. Those are, I think, some like maybe the 4 or 5 high-level steps that you could start to do. Again, chip away at it in small bite-sized chunks for what you can manage. It is 100% overwhelming to try and go at this and be like, I'm going to develop all of this in the next 3 weeks, and I'm going to deploy it all at one time and hope for the best. And that never works. So don't feel like it has to be like a sprint up Mount Everest all in that time frame. Break it down. Take your time, and the guy and the team that you're running will start to feel that you're making concerted efforts to improve the situation they're in.
I love it. It's an investment, but it's probably an investment with the highest possible potential ROI. I mean, it makes sense from a lot of different perspectives. Andrew, it's been an absolute pleasure, sir. For people who want to learn more or connect with you, where can they do that?
You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on there with posting, and then even just email. You can even call me. I don't mind if you share my information. That's fine too. I travel to every CIC event across the country. I go to SEMA every year. I'm very active in the Los Angeles market. Come to a California Auto Body Association meeting, you'll find me there too. So it's hard to miss me.
I love it. You're everywhere doing big things. Really appreciate you. Really appreciate your time. Have a great day.
All right, Cole. Thank you.
That is all for today's episode of The Collision Vision. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Andrew Batenhorst on building a culture of safety in the collision repair industry. If you found today's episode insightful and or entertaining, be sure to give The Collision Vision a follow wherever you listen to your podcast, and on YouTube, where The Collision Vision lives in video form. Please feel free to leave us a review and share the episode with your network as well to help us continue the conversation. On behalf of the Auto Body News team and myself, thank you for coming along for the ride.